This constitutes the meta comment of the week in response to your video or your forum posts. Okay, here's how it is. So when you get a place, right, you get your first home or whatever, your first apartment, you immediately go out to IKEA and you put together whatever it is that looks cool to you. For us it was like red and black, and it was really contemporary modern. And then what happens is 6 years later, it's like, oh man, we really need to update this thing because it just doesn't look great anymore. Well, the same thing actually happens in theology, and it's the problem of future-proofing. Just like in every other domain of human thought, every other domain of human inquiry, there are trends. There's what's hot now. There is what's cool and what's not. And unfortunately, or fortunately, theology is the same way. What's in theology is going to change. Now, in this last week's forums, you were all talking about what you thought the image of God is. And one of the things that we mentioned in the lectures is the fact that throughout history, the notion of what the image of God is changed according to what the philosophy of the day, or the theology of the day, or the culture, or the economic systems that were prevalent of the day. Whatever it was in the air, as it were, filtered its way into a doctrine about the image of God. And so for Aquinas, and then really through the Enlightenment, intellect, because the intellect was so highly prized, that became the best and most important thing about human beings. And in the past 100 years, relationality has become really important as social Trinitarianism, and really Trinitarianism in general, has been recovered in theology. And recognizing the relations between Father, Son, and Spirit has become so hot, so important. And then what do you know? Human beings too are relational. This must be the image of God. And it doesn't matter what attribute or quality or what characteristic of human beings there are, so long as there are trends in thought, so long as there are trends in popular culture, so long as there are trends in what we value, there are going to be those things about humanity that suddenly become the most important thing in the universe. And before you know it, some theologian is going to find a way to say that's what it is. So this is about future-proofing your theology. How do you avoid getting caught up in these trends? And there's no simple answer to that, but there is one thing that you can do, and that is you can be very, very well versed in the theological tradition as a whole. The farther back you know, and the more that you're comfortable speaking to the tradition as a whole, the more you're going to recognize and see the rhythms and the pendulum swings of this is important and that's important, this is popular, this is not popular. And you're going to see how it is that theology adapts itself to culture, and how then culture kind of dumps things. And then you can have a little bit, maybe less of a tight hold on what's happening now. And instead kind of see past some. You get a sense for what is en vogue and what is timeless. And the only way that you can do that is to have a long and storied tradition where you see these ebbs and flows, these movements and trends. And we have that with the Christian tradition. We have that with the image of God. We can look back and we can see how the image of God has changed over time. So started out with something like union or divinization, and it moved to intellect, and then it moved to emotion, and then it moved to psychology, and then to relationality, and now to creativity. We can see it happen, and we can understand the theological and intellectual context out of which it happened. And because we can do that, we can say, whoa, maybe we need to take a step back and wait before we decide what the image is, and recognize the problems with each of these views, and wonder whether or not they're truly textual. Because really, I would say that the other thing that you can do to future-proof your theology is to make sure that it's deeply, deeply textual with the grains of the scriptures. A very deep, close reading of the Bible is going to it's going to keep you in the minds of the apostles and the Lord Jesus and the prophets and the law. And if you're deeply with those things, you're going to be much less likely to be, glomming on to what's cool and what's happening now and what's in vogue. You're going to be with something that's been with us for 2,000 years in the case of the entire canon, and longer when you think of the Hebrew canon. So, future-proof your theology. Be deeply entrenched in the tradition. Be deeply textual, and you'll be much less likely to be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine.